I mean,
absolutely.
Paula Gloria, this is going to be fun, and
Absolutely.
glad we could get in. We'll see how it's going to work. This is a first. It's like Mr. Bell saying, Mr. Watson, come here. We need you because we're going to Skype, right? And welcome very much to Conversations. Great pleasure to welcome to the program fellow producer here and a leader in terms of much of what's going on in terms of developing effective communication to the world, and that being Paula Gloria, the host of the program, the daily program that airs each weekday at 11:30 on Channel 34, Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. And there's a special guest waiting in the wings, as it were, a dear old friend of mine and becoming a friend of hers, Norman Kurland, that we're going to be bringing into the program using the facilities of Skype. But for the moment, let's just say welcome, Gloria, very much. It's fun doing this program, and it's really good to welcome you again.
Thank you, Harold. I'm so excited that we got the Skype going.
Well, we seem to have it going,
Yeah, right.
you know. It's like
Inshallah.
that kind of, inshallah, as they say, yeah. And so Gloria and I have been working for a long time, and I've been working for a long time, and Gloria's coming on like gangbusters, as they say, in terms of putting up, I don't know, how many programs you've got up?
I've got 400 up now.
400
on
programs
YouTube.
up on YouTube that she's done, and she's also streaming to the internet.
That's a
with
big inshallah. You know, today I was streaming, and sometimes the stream goes down, but today the whole internet went down.
It did?
Yeah, I lost my connection on my
Oh, you lost, not the
T1,
internet,
and then
yeah.
it came up again after, you know, maybe by 1 o'clock.
I
But
logged on.
there's so many touch and goes.
I know.
out
I logged
there.
on and just said hello to everybody for about 2 minutes
Thank
as I ran
you.
out the door just
Thank
to
you.
make the point.
No.
And anyway, but she's doing that, and that's a very important development of communications and so forth. And then we've been talking quite a bit over these last few months, and you've picked up on this idea of economics that's come to be called
Yeah.
binary economics, the thinking of Louis Kelso and people who carry on with his thinking. And you've cottoned on, as they say down
Yeah.
south, and so forth. And we've gotten a contact with Norman Kurland, who is a dear old friend of mine. And maybe we could try in the control room, maybe we could bring up Norman Kurland, if we can. Can we go to the sky? There he is.
There he
That's
is.
Norman Kurland. And Norman, welcome very, very much to this initial Skype venture of Conversations.
Well, thank you, Harold and Paula, for having me. I'm very honored to be on this initial program.
That's
to get
right.
The message of binary economics and the ideas of Louis Kelso and Bucky Fuller and others that I consider part of what I call the just third way.
Right you are, Norman. It's so good to see you coming over loud and clear over the internet. And we're doing this, and I think probably other people can start doing this to do a video conference like that. You're down in Arlington, Virginia, and we're here in New York City. And Norman, I wonder maybe we could reminisce, you and I for a minute, if you
Yeah,
excuse us for a
please.
minute, because Norman Kurland is a dear friend of mine from way back when I was first getting started, having been a university professor and having been influenced by Marshall McLuhan in consideration of the importance of the media. And from Marshall McLuhan, I used to visit with him each spring around 1970 or so, and it was from his book, War and Peace in the Global Village, that first caught my eye about Louis Kelso, who had written Two-Factor Theory, The Economics of Reality. And I got in touch. I couldn't get in touch with him. He was in San Francisco. Things were different there. It was a little more harder to communicate. You didn't have internet and so forth. But I found an office down in Washington that had this fellow Kurland. And I called and set up a trip to Washington to do a program about it. And that's when I met Norman Kurland for the first time. And we were reminiscing before we started the program that it was inaugural day. I can remember driving in the morning, and it was overcast and so forth. And it was inaugural day for the second term of Richard Nixon in January of 1973. So we go way back, brother, and welcome to the program. Do you remember that early meeting that we had on Massachusetts Avenue?
I sure do. I sure do, Harold. I was up on the attic.
Yes, you were up in the garret.
In the building, 2027 Massachusetts Avenue.
That's it.
In which the Civil Rights Leadership Conference was down in the basement, and this was the Union of United Hebrew Congregation.
That's it, with Hebrews,
owned
right.
the building. and I was getting free rent there.
Good
as
price.
we started Louis Kelso's operation, well, I guess this way, we had started the Institute for the Study of Economic Systems.
That's it. That's the one that I did when I did a search and found you. I finally found you
Right.
and got in touch with you, yes.
You were out of
Right,
touch for a number of years?
Well, we had never been in touch. That's when we first
oh,
met.
yeah.
Across the
Yeah.
crowded room, yeah.
So this was, and so you gave us the first opportunity to really be videotaped, have a conversation, and you helped to get the message out, Harold.
Yeah, that's right. And I hope I still have that program. Some of those early ones are the hardest ones to get. I want to go into that a little bit down the line. But Norman, I wonder maybe you could, for Paula and for the audience, share a little bit of your background coming up before that, because you've been very deeply involved in the civil rights movement. I know you had with what was her name that was here in New York?
Ennis Francis.
That's Ennis Francis. Did a program with her. I think you knew Stokely Carmichael, did you not?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And you were involved in the civil rights movement when it was really a challenge to be involved in the civil rights movement, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you talk a little about your background, also a little bit about your education, if you could, for us.
Right. Well, okay. I finished the year at UConn, University of Connecticut, in '52, and then went into the Air Force for 5 years in electronic countermeasures.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a couple of commands in the military over in Japan, and then got out and went to the University of Chicago Law School, where I studied both economics and law. And a good education, but it gave me a sense that the world could be changed by changing the fundamental institutions.
Try to look at the camera, Norman.
Okay.
Try to look into the no, at your computer, at the top of your computer screen. Now look at the camera, if you can. Pretend you're looking into the. There you go. You're looking into the camera. You see?
All
okay.
Right. Okay.
You'll get the hang of it, young man.
Okay, that's good, Harold.
Yeah.
I'm glad. Let me push this. Okay. No, I guess I can't get. Yeah, here it is.
Go ahead, play with it.
Yeah. Okay. Does that look like I'm looking into the?
Yes.
Yeah. You see, you're looking into the camera,
Okay,
and people see your beautiful blue eyes. No, but talk more about University of Chicago and your civil rights work, and Ennis Francis.
There I studied the neoclassical, laissez-faire approach to economics. I felt very uncomfortable with it, but did very well. I managed to, but I saw some good in it too. In that I could understand the nature of the market economy, and that the market economy had some strengths in it, but it wasn't enough. But the law taught me that I was more interested in justice than the law.
That's a good thing to be interested in.
And I was interested in how you change the system so that you can deal with the root causes of war.
Right.
And so I came to Washington in actually it was in December of '59, just
Wow.
before Kennedy was elected. Eisenhower was still in the White House, and I went and had a job with the health, education, and welfare.
Oh, you were in the government, yeah.
I was in the government. I spent 5 years as a civil servant.
What were you doing there?
Well, this is interesting. You've heard of Ted Sorensen.
Have I ever? I know his brother very well, Robert.
Ted Sorensen had the job that I took. He got RIF, that's reduction in force, and he had to take a job with some obscure congressman from Massachusetts. Of course, and that guy later became president. But in any event, the area that we focused on was basically segregation, racial issues, poverty issues.
Wonderful.
And so I could cut my teeth in that area, and was involved in I could go into many things.
Yeah, I know we could. And Paula, you can
Wow.
pipe in here anytime you want. We're talking to him.
No, it's
He's got a great,
fascinating.
rich background. He's very concerned with justice and has been.
Well,
When did
and
you?
also
Yeah.
basic constitutional issues. For example, when Kennedy came in, I was asked to prepare the brief which would justify his position on the church-state issue. That is that,
Big
that
issue.
there was supposed to be an absolute wall of separation between church and state.
Right.
And at that point, I still was taking the position of the Civil Liberties Union that there is an absolute source. But as a lawyer, I looked into the other side and then did a 180-degree reversal on that issue because it had to do with aid to schools, church schools. And my position after reading the opposition was that they were more right than I was, so I reversed myself. And that is to say, I think that education is the critical thing, and I was opposed to the idea of monopolies. And felt that it was important to let the parents, giving them the power to choose, and came up with the position supporting the vouchers.
Yeah, you were always in the bailiwick of justice. That was always a lodestar for you. And when did you first meet or become aware of Louis Kelso? Unfortunately,
that was 5 years later.
5 years. Okay,
Yeah,
right. Okay.
Because I left HEW in '62 and went to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights.
Good for you.
And was in the General Counsel's office, and the area that we had as an area of responsibility was Mississippi.
Oh,
And
wow.
and we were to report on the violations of civil rights in Mississippi. So
You didn't know a woman named Lucy Commissar by any chance, did you?
yeah, Lucy Commissar.
She's
I
great.
do remember Lucy Commissar.
She was down there in '62 managing a thing in I don't know, Montgomery, I think, when there were dogs and whatnot.
Well,
I mean,
that was Birmingham, but
Birmingham, right?
My beat was Mississippi. I became very close to Medgar Evers before he was killed.
Yeah.
And Aaron Henry, and particularly the SNCC kids, the
SNCC,
Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee,
including Stokely.
Stokely, Stokely was not in Mississippi. He was in Alabama. But I knew Stokely because I participated in some of the SNCC conferences in 1963 after Medgar was killed. I had written an analysis called the Anatomy of a Martyrdom, showing how the press, the media, really pulled the trigger on Medgar, in that they just raised the issues of white supremacy and pretty much encouraged some violence through the newspapers, through editorials.
Yeah,
and that led to his assassination.
Yeah, you had been in the military. You had been in the course of action, but to be in the South or be involved in the South in those early '60s, it was dangerous.
It was
nasty.
Really, that's right.
I take my hat off to all who went down there in that vanguard way.
That's absolutely right.
That's Lucy.
And I've seen the most courageous people that I've ever known. Bob Moses of SNCC, who was a Harvard graduate, a teacher. I've never encountered anyone with more courage than Bob Moses.
Yeah.
And had several situations where he was threatened, and we were both together. But I just felt that his presence there was like a real Moses. He was leading people off the plantations, registering to vote, and so it took that kind of courage. And I saw in the civil rights movement what I consider to be the last of the great revolutions in America, a peaceful revolution where the eyes of the world were concentrated on a laboratory of white supremacy.
Right.
Even though
apartheid, it was like apartheid for crying out loud.
It was. That's right. And I think it was that level of courage, but also something else. It was a focus on what I consider to be a moral imperative, and that is that access to citizen rights had to be available to every human being.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, we're talking about political rights, which I later felt was, it's unfortunate that equal emphasis wasn't on economic rights. But in any event, the concept was who should have access to the political ballot, which is how you connect up to the political process.
Voting Rights Act, 65. There was heady times in that.
That's right. And so it was in those years. And then I remember in 1964 when they had the Mississippi Freedom Summer, and they brought in students from all over the country to come down to Mississippi. I think that was very important in terms of communicating the message.
Yeah, right. And one of the problems in television, Norman, is that we only got 58 minutes, you know?
Okay,
we could talk to you for 17 hours without a stop.
Can I ask one question?
We're going to let Paula throw in a couple questions.
Just one thing I want to throw in, because I don't know as much as you, because you experienced the civil rights. I was more a product of Berkeley in the 60s. I was in high school during the free speech movement and so on. But what I'm wondering is, you said, unfortunately, it wasn't economic rights, it was political. And I want to see if you and Harold can kind of elaborate on that, because Harold is always saying all the politicians offer is sharing wealth through jobs.
Well,
so could you comment on what economic wealth or sharing would have been?
And maybe introduce us to Louis Kelso.
This is the perfect question, because just let me give you just a little bit more history. Anyway, I was a maverick within the Civil Rights Commission. They didn't trust people working closely with the activists, and I was very close to them. So I left. I was assigned over to the Office of Education when the anti-poverty program was first launched. I was writing speeches for the Commissioner Keppel, who was the Commissioner of Education, civil rights speeches mainly. But at that time, when the Economic Opportunity Act was passed, 1964, following Kennedy's assassination, I saw in that act a way to change the economic system. Now,
had you been in touch with Kelso by then?
No. It's another year, Harold. I'm going to tell you.
Okay, but we got to get to Louis Kelso.
I'm going to tell you the story. So what happened was, I got involved. I wrote the guidelines for participation of the poor, maximum feasible participation of the poor, because I believed, learning from SNCC, the importance of organizing people, communities, so that they can begin to demand their fundamental human rights. But my best vision for economics at that time was basically either the guaranteed annual income or the what Milton Friedman called the negative income tax. Just get rid of the welfare bureaucracy and just give checks to the people who didn't have enough income to meet their basic subsistence needs.
Were you in touch with Robert Theobald and the Triple Revolution?
I was in touch with Theobald and many others in that whole movement. But then what happened is, I got assigned to San Francisco, and it was about the time of the Berkeley riots, and this is 1965.
Mario Savio.
And you had Reagan was governor. You had the riots at Berkeley. And I was going around the country. I was going around California funding some of the most
radical,
participatory community action programs in Kern County, where Cesar Chavez was, and Ventura County, and then even in Arizona, I got more money into a little place that Saul Alinsky people organized, Guadalupe, Arizona, right outside of Phoenix, than in all of Phoenix and Maricopa County.
Yeah, I was
in other words, when you have control over money, you can pretty much control events.
Yeah, I was a professor at Long Beach College of the University of California in '68.
Okay.
So I was out there raising all kinds of trouble.
Okay, so
remember
this is
Chicago?
65
Yeah.
I'm talking about. And in March of '65, I became convinced because of the war on poverty bureaucracy, the leadership, that they were really not interested in empowering the poor.
Right.
And they were interested in jobs and welfare.
Well,
see, and that, of course, went against the very spirit of the poverty program as I understood it. So I was getting very frustrated, and I also could see at that time that the biggest opposition to the war on poverty would come from the taxpayers.
Huh.
Okay, because for a while you can push them, but at some point they will simply hire more cops.
You're still not in touch with.
So I could see that neither the leadership nor the strategy would work.
And you're still not in.
Office, a man named Mark Goldies, who was part of the counterculture movement out there, and he started telling me about a new idea. And within 5 minutes, I could hear, and I said, "My God, this is what I've been looking for."
What was that new idea that you could grasp within 5 minutes, and our audience might be able to do the same?
You see, I suddenly, because remember, I studied the law, I understood what property was, I understood the nature of the market, and I was very much against monopolies or concentration of power of any kind. And suddenly I began to see that through the world of finance, you could change the world. You could begin to give poor people access to the means to become owners. And with that, they automatically would have power that they wouldn't otherwise have. But you could do it in a synergistic way. You didn't have to pull down the rich to lift up the non-rich.
At this
Once
point,
you understand that, everything else falls into place.
Had you met Kelso yet?
I hadn't yet met Kelso.
Become aware of
it. Let me tell you how that happened. Then, so I was very excited. I left the poverty program and became the director of planning for the Citizens Crusade Against Poverty. This was headed by the leading labor statesman in America, Walter Reuther of the United Auto Workers. He was the chair of that. But you had Martin Luther King. You had all the civil rights leadership, all of the liberal labor leadership, and you had church leaders, about the head of the National Council at Churches, and who later became the head of the World Council at Churches. You had Mike Harrington and Bayard Rustin and various others. In any event, I was committed to bringing the Kelso idea to the liberal establishment.
When had you gotten the Kelso idea clear?
Oh,
when
no,
did you meet Lewis?
I was given free rein. I was given free rein by Dick Boone, who was the head of. He was Bob Kennedy's friend, and he was the head of the Citizens of the Citizens Crusade, and he was a thinker and a Jeffersonian thinker and a believer in getting power to the poor. And so he protected me, and I was able to get to discuss Kelso's idea even before meeting him with former head of the President's Council of Economic Advisors, Leon Kaiserling, Mike Harrington, and other people. But then I went out to the West Coast, and there was a conference of poor people in Oakland, California, and as a result of that, being there, I decided to contact Kelso, and he and I met, and I spent my time trying to get Kelso into the Citizens Crusade Against Poverty.
Okay, good. Now, maybe you could share Kelso with the audience, and maybe you could bring in that 5-minute revelatory epiphany you had with language that would be able to get across to our audience and get them because one of the problems in television is you've got to get it to where you can, you know, a limited time.
Yeah, Norman, I've had feedback on my YouTube account that they said if you're just trying to talk among the elite, then you've achieved your goal. But if you're trying to reach other people, we need more explanation.
We need more what?
Explanation. What happened in 5 minutes?
Yeah, what was that 5-minute epiphany?
Spell it out.
The interesting thing is that poor people understand what we're talking about better than academics. Academics are caught into a paradigm that doesn't work, you see, and that's where Bob Ashford and others who are trying to explain what binary economics, they're trying to overcome the paradigm or the worldview of all the economists, the various schools of economics.
Right.
But when if we debate them, we win because there's a hole in their logic. They think that the only way that you can distribute money to ordinary people is through jobs, and to the extent there aren't enough jobs, you just you print money or you redistribute income through the tax system. Well, if you understand that most people would rather own than be owned, and most people understand that ownership is where power is, and if you believe that there shouldn't be a concentration of power in anybody's hands, and that you must structure a way in which power can be, you can say, pulverized and spread out among the people, just as the ballot is spread out among all the people, and then you begin to say, okay, now what does it take for everyone to become an owner without having to take away property rights from existing owners?
Yeah, but you'll notice that there aren't very many owners in the American or world economy or any of the political entities around the world. Right. You'll notice. And is it not true, you are aware, that the basic policy grounding statement for the United States of America is the Employment Act of 1946 that has never been revisited in view of technology taking over increasingly and capital instruments.
Exactly.
And the basic problem is not being faced by any of our leaders, including Obama and Hillary and all the rest who are talking about change until they get at the economic theory.
Jobs.
Pardon?
And I understood because of my experience in Strategic Air Command, knowing the potential of technology for destruction, that same technology can be used, as Bucky Fuller says, for livingry instead of weaponry.
Did you come to know the degree in which the weapons of destruction are destructive in any kind of special way other than just as a citizen? Do you have any inside information on just how destructive? And is it possible that those weapons...
You could eliminate all life on Earth.
Wait a minute.
If we unleash all the military weaponry there exists.
Wait a minute, Robert. Do you know?
But here,
do you know that with authority?
Who invented the internet? Here we are using the internet. It was invented originally by the Pentagon.
ARPANET.
Okay, so that shows you that some of this technology that has been used to destroy lives is going to make it possible for us to unite people from all over the world. So that everybody in the world, if you have the right design, can become an owner.
But it's the policy of the United States never has been revisited. Unlike the Communications Act, that's been revisited. They've never revisited the idea that we will distribute income to the folks, to the people, through jobs, through labor.
But how?
And the labor theory of value is enshrined in all the thinking.
Exactly. I mean, but this was natural when you think about it, Harold, as Bucky Fuller would be able to say it.
God bless him.
For thousands of years, you're dealing with very primitive tools and technology. And it was only around 1776 when you had the steam engine that suddenly the Industrial Revolution was coming in, creeping in slowly over time. And it increases at an exponential rate as you begin to get creative people figuring out how to do more and more with less and less. to move from human slaves and wage slaves to what Bucky called energy slaves.
That's right.
So that we can, by owning the energy slaves, we can liberate the human beings.
Right.
If they're owners.
Remember,
or else they're going to be competing with the energy slaves, and then they're going to lose their sources of income.
Yeah,
so
remember,
they'll have inadequate and insecure incomes, and human beings, being what they are, you first have to deal with their survival and their security needs before you can lift them up to what Maslow talks about, the higher human needs, so that human beings can become fully human. And that's possible today if you combine the ideas of Kelso with the ideas of Fuller and other people who are thinking in post-scarcity terms.
You couldn't talk any clearer talk than me. I think you got Fuller and Kelso are two lodestars for myself. Why do you think so few people are able to think this way? What is there about the paradigm? Bob and Rodney Shakespeare's book, Bob Ashford and Robbie, Binary Economics, The New Paradigm. Why are so few people able to conceive of that to where we never hear any talk in the popular or even the academic press, hardly, about the ideas of Lewis Kelso or the ideas of expanding ownership as a way of forming capital and distributing income?
Let me explain what's going on. We have people who are committed. But many people understand binary economics. However, the real problem is that those who are supposed to be teaching it are a bunch of individualists. They're all on their own ego trips and can never understand the notion of solidarity. You must work together. Just as the communists came together with the wrong idea, but they organized, we have to organize, not on the left, not on the right, but on the high moral ground.
High moral ground. Okay, you say, yeah.
Radical centrism.
Well, what
revolutionary center.
Okay.
Where you're coming in, the revolution is a revolution of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on that basis, just as one person, one vote, or the anti-white supremacy idea came in, just as that became a moral focus, now the idea of empowering people, enabling them to have justice in terms of economic justice, this is what excited me about Kelso.
Mm-hmm.
This is knowing that in the best law schools, whether it's Chicago or Harvard or any of the law schools, the one thing to keep in mind is they teach you the law, but they don't teach you justice. So you don't hear that in the law schools. And as a result of this, lawyers come out as the architects of the system, and they permit unjust institutions to be perpetuated because they don't even understand the principles of justice, the principles of economic justice, the principles of social justice. So therefore, they perpetuate the system.
Haven't many of our wisdom leaders and spiritual leaders told us to be concerned with the least among us and have justice before you always and so forth, and it's been roundly ignored by the political leaders?
That's right. That's right.
And that's been the case throughout all of history.
You know, Harold, every one of the major religions recognizes that justice is the essence of all religions, the essence, because what that says, the essence of justice, is the dignity of every human person.
Why has it been ignored?
The sacredness of life, the sacredness of a person, person.
Why have those strictures been ignored throughout so much of human history, to where you've always had a few running every society, and most of the people were wallowing around in the mud?
Well, but basically because they don't understand the principles of justice.
Okay.
Now, I discovered Kelso, the most important chapter in his first book with Mortimer Adler was chapter 5, which was the first time I ever could understand the meaning of economic justice.
Tell us.
The principles of economic justice. And if you're trying to understand binary economics, you must start with the moral principles underlying binary economics. This is where Robert Ashford and I have a difference, because I don't think he is teaching justice.
Well, okay, but you
Yeah,
teach
but just a second.
Bob's pretty good.
My forte here is a spiritual and political show, and I always say that when we consider the sacrifice of Abraham, we have to consider what he had gone through before his heart was crying out to say, give me the power. He needed the power, and he was willing to give his firstborn for that power. How do you, like right now I discussed with you, just a little retail shop in the East Village, having been on both sides, working in a shop and being a shop owner, it's very hard to let go of power and be convinced that as a result of letting go of it, you're going to gain more power. I think that's the crux of the issue.
Well, we have a method for enabling non-owners, workers in the corporate sector to become owners. And Harold was talking before about Russell Long. Russell Long sat down with Kelso and I for 4 hours, in which he paid the bill, by the way.
He did. That was at the
right.
Montpellier room in the Madison Hotel. That'd be quite a
Montpellier
bill.
Room in the Madison Hotel.
Did he pay for the wine as well?
No, November 27th, 1973.
Okay.
And Russell Long, who was one of the most powerful people in Washington, he headed up the finance committee. He was the son of the populist Huey Long, who was the share of the wealth man, trying to take from the Rockefellers and give to the people. Almost became president.
He might have become
challenging
president
Roosevelt
if he hadn't been
before
assassinated.
he was assassinated. And Russell Long sat and listened to us, and he said, you know, my daddy was a Robin Hood populist, and I'm not, because Russell Long had stolen enough money so that Huey Long had acquired enough ownership through his political power so that he left his son a fairly wealthy person. So his son had to try to was obviously interested in not losing what was his source of economic power.
That's nice. He showed his hand. He was transparent.
Pardon?
Huh? It was nice that he showed his hand. He was transparent.
He was very honest. He was very. Russell Long was a terrific guy.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I'm on both sides of the equation. Having had a shop myself, you fear that those who are working for you won't really love it as much as you do, care for it.
Well,
you know, it's hard to let go.
Okay, but here's the thing.
They'll just mess it up.
Yeah,
this is an area where the ESOP, by the laws structuring the ESOP, you
Tell
could
them
have
what an
good
ESOP
ones,
is.
Our audience doesn't know ESOP. Explain that.
ESOP is Employee Stock Ownership Plan. It's a method of finance where workers can become owners of capital on credit, in which the future profits pay the credit, so that they're not on the hook. They're not responsible except to work together to make sure that the company is profitable. Because if, as owners, the bottom line becomes important to them. As non-owners, the workers don't care about profits. So that if everybody has a common focus to make the company as a whole successful, profits are good. The only time that profits are considered to be bad is if only a few people get them. So
well, that's
where,
the way it is in this world.
That's
the way the world's set up. If I look about
but
me,
that's only because of the way the lawyers have structured the system.
First, kill all the lawyers.
Come on, what is that, Norman?
And that is, and that is that the lawyers have not made credit available to the laws, the tax laws, the Federal Reserve Act governing how money is created, all the laws dealing with finance, labor laws, welfare laws. They're all designed to perpetuate a wage system where the principal means is for people to get their income only through jobs.
That's right. That's the labor.
And to the extent that it doesn't work, then through welfare redistribution. What Kelso brings in, on the basis of his vision of justice, is that the same privileges that are available to the few should, through the law, be available to everyone as basic citizen rights.
As a right.
In other words, credit, money and credit. Money and credit are only fabrications of the mind. All they are, credit it only means promises within a system of contracts where the promises have to be kept. Okay, so a person who now owns, who has a lot of, like Bill Gates, he can get capital credit. But the ordinary person cannot get capital credit because they have no assets. They have
collateral.
No property to act as collateral. Why collateral? Because a lender wants to have security, wants to make sure that, well, in case the loan goes sour, I can turn to the collateral so I can make up my losses.
You're coming out the left side of the screen.
This is another idea that Kelso brought in.
Move over to your left.
You got to move over.
Move over to your left. You're off center. Move over to your left and try and keep your eye on the camera, pal. You're on TV.
Oh, you're getting me excited.
You're on TV.
Well, now let's go back to collateral. I would say that would be Isaac, Abraham's dear son.
Oh, absolutely. It's not only, but here, the idea of credit. If you go to Maimonides, who wrote about the eighth and highest, or the various eight orders of charity, from the worst, the most demeaning form of charity to the highest level. The highest level of charity is to provide the poor man access to a loan so that he can become independent of charity, so he can begin to help himself. And so there's a recognition of loans and credit as the means by which people can go into business for themselves and not be dependent on others.
Right.
And that's, to me, that's the good life, where you bring together a world of people who have power, can govern themselves, and are free to make choices, as long as their choices don't hurt other people.
You know, it's interesting, Norman, because it almost seems as though credit is available, but for the wrong reasons.
Exactly.
It's to get you to buy things instead of get you to create things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have not differentiated between good uses of credit and bad uses of credit. The rich get the good uses of credit, and the poor get the worst kind of credit, consumer credit, and every time they buy something, it's just putting them deeper and deeper into the hole. And you just had the subprime mortgage problem, which is threatening to bankrupt the entire financial structure of the United States and the value of the dollar in the world.
Norman, I still want to get back to something kind of practical. We have about 15 minutes left.
Okay.
And you had something in mind, I felt, when I gave you this little humble model of a retail store in the East Village to run more efficiently, where both the owner and the people keeping the shop in the majority hours of the shops being open. What was your what were you thinking of?
Well, first of all, if the owner wanted to saw the value of making the workers into owners, and not just workers without all the rights of private property, and many of the employee ownership plans provide people shares but without voting power. To me, that's taking away of a fundamental right.
Yeah. For example, in using the simple model, how much are we going to sell the hats for?
Yeah.
Who decides?
But that's right. Well, but there's a difference between management questions and questions of there is a need for management, and then there's a need for a board to set the rules for management and to control the policies of the corporation. But you have to decentralize. Let me put it this way: you have to centralize values and principles of a company. So you set those up in your policies, and your code of ethics, and your core values. these are basic, so that there should be a centralization of that. Everybody should agree. And that's a community of people coming together with common values and a common set of goals. But then when it comes to implementation, there is decentralization of operations. That everybody, this is known in the religious world as subsidiarity. You want to have the decisions being made as close as possible at the lowest possible level where people can make intelligent decisions. But you want everybody to have a sense of the whole, but then be able to make decisions. Now, there are some decisions as to what do we do about what's the best price. Well, there are people who are specializing in being able to determine that. And if they're not doing a good job, then through your board of directors or as shareholders, people can begin to complain and straighten it out.
Okay,
but here's the problem. Here's the problem of the example you give me. There are, as I said, 10,000 employee stock ownership plans. Most of them are very successful, but very few of them have what I call justice-based management, which is a philosophy of leadership where the leader understands that their job is to be the role model, the teacher, the one who inspires, and the one who empowers and enriches others. And if he does that, each level of the company will in turn do the same thing. They'll see themselves as serving others. And the most successful companies are going to be those who know how to serve the customers. And if they bring the customers higher value in terms of the quality of services and products at decent prices, they're going to be delivering higher value to the customers. In other words, you have to turn the pyramid around, upside down, where the leader has to see themselves at the bottom.
You know, I'm very excited by what you say because Marshall Rosenberg talks about a style of communication of empathy where we understand our feelings and our needs, and if we don't label people, we can have a kind of communication where, like I said to him, doesn't a corporation have a need for profit? He said, no. A corporation is a collection of individuals, all of whom have the highest, one of the highest human needs is the need to contribute. So you would contribute better, and it's not a...
But how do you measure it?
Excuse me?
You know, how do you measure it? Well, binary economics provides you a means for measuring those contributions. There are two ways you can contribute. Two ways. This is binary economics. There are two sweeping categories of things. One are all the human beings, from the entrepreneur to the person who is the janitor. Everybody is a human being, and that's called labor. That's one. The other is what's really changing in the world. It's not human beings aren't changing. Our nature isn't changing. But what is changing is the technology and the systems that we create. And they keep getting better and better and more effective. And so you can contribute if you're the owner of the technology and the systems. Then you can also contribute to this interdependent way of bringing in all of the human factors and all of the non-human factors, which Kelso would call capital.
Yeah, but how do you get the capital? How do you get the capital? How do you get the capital?
How do you get the capital? You get it the most effective way under what we have a national blueprint called the Capital Homestead Act, taken from Kelso's proposals. And the most effective way is to get credit through your local banks at the lowest possible cost. Now, what would that be? How would that money be created? Well, under Section 13 of the Federal Reserve Act, every regional Fed, there are 12 of them around the country, has the power to discount or to create money, to monetize new capital needed by the companies. Okay? It's in the law. It's in the law today. So that if the Fed creates money and just charges whatever charge they have for their little service, maybe 0.5% or less. because they monitor the banking system.
Banking.
And then they supply that to the local banks. And the local banks add their service costs, plus you can also have an insurance premium. Either the local bank self-insures against the risk that the loan may go bad, or better yet, you have Warren Buffett and others putting together a capital credit insurance corporation and reinsurance corporation so that hello?
No, it's
Hello.
there. We're
Hello.
there.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So that you pool the risk. And that's what reinsurance is for. Kelso, in his second book with Mortimer Adler, came up with the idea of capital credit insurance, which
Right.
is a substitute for collateral. It makes it possible for a person who could be in a coma to become an owner.
Right.
You see,
Yes, but
it's all a matter
Norman,
of the law.
And you can't allow the process to be one that is just a big, gigantic venture capital crapshoot view of
It
things.
makes no sense.
But Norman-
Harold, that's gambling, and I'm talking
Right.
investment.
Well, that's Wall Street.
Kelso was talking about the difference between speculation and gambling. You know, they let the rich guys do that.
But
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
second,
yeah, right.
just a second, Norman. Let's not kid ourselves. A lot of these machinations are thievery against the common good, and
you're
there's
right.
a lot of fear about being caught. You know, and
You're right.
it gets worse and worse. I still say we need to create something whereby we can indicate that there will be these always open connections, that no matter what has been done, there will be a willingness to go forth together.
I agree.
I think without that model, you're going to have more violence and more desire to either get rid of the Federal Reserve and come up with some credit
Exactly.
card thing, or whatever
Exactly.
the new thing is, you're going to find it's going to be even more exclusive, even more impenetrable.
Absolutely.
So I think
But remember that the law is a human creation, and if the legal system and the financial system are poorly structured, if they're flawed, we have a responsibility to come together, organize, and demand that it be changed. You see, but you cannot change the system until we organize. That's why people who are going off on their own ego trips, seeking their own glorification instead of recognizing that we must be servants. We must organize for others, not for ourselves, because we have to leave behind a system where the whole world can benefit. You see, I see the what we call the happy revolution, the good revolution, the revolution of ideas. Kelso and Fuller are putting their fingers on that, and that if we do it successfully in this country, it will be copied all over the world. And I'm talking to Islamic scholars, Jewish scholars, Catholic scholars, other Christians, and when you sit down and talk about economic justice, social justice, and you talk about the principles and the Kelso vision, nobody opposes it. So what this is telling me is that it isn't a flaw in the ideas. The ideas are common sense. You're not trying to change human beings. And you don't even target human beings as the problem. The problem is the system. And therefore, since the system was created by human beings, it can be recreated or transformed by human beings. That's the challenge.
Let me just
that's
put
what
one.
you're up to,
Let me
yeah.
put one thing forth, and I'll let Harold finish up this show. Marshall Rosenberg says, "Wouldn't you rather have somebody do what you're wanting them to do, not because you're going to punish them if they don't do it, or reward them if they do it, but that they do it because they empathize with why you want them to do it." In other words,
those are the leaders.
those
are the leaders, and the problem is that the culture is a culture of greed. Okay, it's based on greed.
No. I think that's making human beings bad, like what he says.
No. I'm saying it's part of human nature. Human beings have the possibility, as Reinhold Niebuhr was saying, they have inclinations to the vices, but they have aspirations for the virtues. So we have to take the virtues, the values like justice and love, and that should guide us. but the system is sending the wrong signals. It is not helping people to move toward more justice, more compassion toward each other, toward the empowerment of each person. And so you end up with a system where power remains concentrated. And Lord Acton told us, you concentrate power, it has a tendency to corrupt. And the more you concentrate it, as he said, absolute power will corrupt absolutely. So it's in those systems of the monopolies, that in institutional concentrations of power, that cause the culture to send off the wrong signals to young people, to workers, to the general society. So therefore, it takes these ideas to people to gravitate to these ideas, understand the ideas, and then organize. Just as I was saying, SNCC and Medgar Evers and others in the South, they organize behind one person, one vote. We now have to organize and say everyone must be an owner. Own or be owned. How do we change the Federal Reserve? How do we change the federal tax system, all tax systems, so that they begin to encourage, not force, but encourage people voluntarily to become owners?
Well, Sid, Norman, it seems to me like we used to talk these things over way back in the 70s up in that garret, if I remember right. We've been saying the same good stuff all along, and it's so good to see you got a couple good people in Mr. Fuller and Mr. Kelso. Couldn't agree with you more. It's so good to talk to you. And this has been an experiment, ladies and gentlemen, in reaching out through the wonders of the technology, which is changing, that's for sure, and talking to a dear friend of mine and a new emerging friend with Paula Gloria, and he's down in Washington, down at the belly of the beast, right? Rome on the Potomac, right?
One thing.
We only got a few seconds left. Wind it up, Cal.
For the last 3 Aprils around tax day, we've had demonstrations at the Federal Reserve.
Right.
And Walter Fauntroy, who used to be the chairman of the House Banking Subcommittee and one of Martin Luther King's chief lieutenants, spoke, and we have a video at CapitalHomestead.com.
Okay, good. CapitalHomestead.com.
They can get to that video, and also on how to capital homesteading for every citizen. The whole agenda is there. A book which you can download free.
Tell you what I'm going to do. We got it all there for you. Norman, so good to talk to you. All the best from New York. We're going to stay in touch. We're going to do more of this. Glad to have introduced you to Paula Gloria and the gang here at MNN. You're a great addition to our faculty here at Autodidact University.
Over and out.
Anytime, Harold.
Okay, good to talk to you. It's been your pleasure to have these perceptions. Thank you for viewing.
Thank you for inviting me.